Hi there, I'm Ray Bonenberg with the Ontario Maple Syrup Producers Association. Today we're shooting a video on basic sugar bush management, part of a 4-video series that we've been doing. I'm assisted today by Frank Knappen, a registered professional forester in Ontario.
Vigor. There are 2 ways of looking at a tree to see its vigor, and the more vigorous the tree, the more sap you're going to get. One is the bark and the other is the crown. Here we have an example of a tree with what we call tight bark. Everything is very, very smooth, just like a young person, and that's good. Regardless of the size, that's good. Then we have this tree over here. You can see the bark is more rigid, more flaky. Though it's bigger, it's also showing it's going to have less vigor. The second thing to look at for vigor of a tree is the crown. The fold of the crown means more leaves, which means more energy, which means more sap. On the tree to our left here, which is facing south, you can see it's got a good crown. It's very good shape. The branches are U and not V, so it's going to be around a long time. Plus, because of its tight bark, it's got good vigor. Meanwhile, the tree over here, it also has a good crown because it's the tallest. However, you can see with its bark, the fact it's flaky, and also the crown, it's slowly getting smaller. It's going to have to go, even though it's a maple. Anytime you drill into a tree, you've injured it, whether it's by a tap or if you even do with a nail, okay? What happens now has been discovered by Alex Shigo, who is a forest pathologist. And what happens now is you've injured a tree, disease will come into that opening, and the tree will react to it. It'll do a defensive mechanism, or else if it doesn't do that, the tree will end up dying. So it'll take all the forces within the tree itself and will form a shield around the disease. It'll actually be a 3-dimensional, almost like a saran wrap. It completely encloses it. The last part for it to do is to close out the opening like it did here. Now it's sealed completely and the disease will stop growing because it's got no more air. This one here, it's still open. It's going to take maybe another year or 2 and then it'll seal over and then it'll stop. So once the tree now is sealed over, what's happened is the interior of the wood is all been compartmentalized. And that also means that it's an internal plug. So there's any water or sap going up or down in that tree now has to go around it. And that's another reason why when you're told how many taps to put into the different sized trees, it's important. Do too many, you make too many internal plugs and you actually turned off the tap. Here we have a larger, older maple, and you can see there's 3 things here that we're concerned about. One is the opening we talked about too, and this is COVID, which means that a lot of the internal part has been blocked off for the running of sap. The other one too is we looked at before is the bark. You see, it's easy to remove. It's very, very flaky. Another indication that its vigor is decreasing. And then when you look up, the all-important part is the crown itself. Even though it's very large, you could take a look. It has very few small branches, which is where the leaves would be, which makes the sap. So this tree, with those conditions of less vigor, it's time for it to be cut so that another maple could take over this spot and continue on with your syrup production. So once this tree now is down on the ground, the other maple behind us, you can see here with its crown, it's slightly suppressed by this other tree. With the tree now gone, the branches will have an opportunity to go further out and increase its space with more leaves, more sap production for the particular trees that were suppressed.
A key element of a healthy sugar bush is windbreaks. Behind me is a white pine stand that is providing wind protection for this sugar bush. Further behind that stand is a planted red pine plantation that is actually helping reduce that wind. Benefit of windbreaks are threefold. One is the health of the sugar bush in reducing damage by winds, high winds. 2, during sugaring time, it actually creates a warmer sugar bush for the sap to run, especially the north and east sides. And 3, a south-facing windbreak will help reduce sun scald that we talked about in the plantation video. So you'll also see that the windbreak can be varied, not only conifer, but it can be hardwood as well. And here there's maple and ash coming in. Also, the aerial shot that you see here shows windbreaks that are strategically placed to reduce north and east winds during sugaring time. So behind me on my right is a windbreak planted in 1993. You can see the size of them, quite significant. Behind me is a windbreak planted in 2013. And the idea is to get a different level of vegetation to break the wind.
Part of your sugar bush management will be species diversity. It'll attract different types of wildlife, plus of course it is aesthetically pleasing. Even in this spot we have a variety. Here we have a maple, and we have some ironwood, we have yellow birch, white birch, basswood, we even have an aspen over there, and we have some oak. Diversity is nice, but sometimes not too well, because some species attracts things that you don't want. Like oak will attract squirrels, and you know what squirrels can do to your line. So if you have oak in your bush, you really should think about removing them. Here we have an oak, and as we mentioned, this attracts squirrels, and that will do damage to your line. Plus, if you look at its crown and its height, it's suppressing these trees behind us over here. By removing it, we will release your future maple trees for your sugar bush. So we just took on an oak because it was interfering with the growth of your potential future maple, and also it would attract squirrels. There are other species in your bush too that you have to be concerned about. They're invasive. They're also alien to the province, and you're gonna have to remove them. The major one is a garlic mustard because it discourages the regeneration of maples. If you see it, you got to get rid of it. Then there's other ones that are a bit toxic if you touch it. And then there's ones that are coming out from the cities. They're exotic species from Asia and Europe, which interfere with the growth of your sugar bush. And there's this book here that will help you understand that.
One of the main issues that used to be very common was grazing of sugar bush. We highly don't recommend that. It provides a great opportunity for other species to grow, ironwood, some other ground species, and the compaction from the cattle and horses actually prohibits maples from growing.
Here we have a situation where two decisions will need to be made. And one of them we've already done. We released a couple of trees so that you have more crown space for these existing trees. They'll have more sunlight. As a result, they're going to have more branches, more leaves, and more sap production. Now the second decision has to be made, which of these two should remain? Because you only want one spot for the tree, not two, because it'll cause more problems later on when you have to manage it. One may fall down because of extra weight from a snow or from a storm. The best time to do the work for your sugar bush is in the fall. That's because the bark is nice and tight to the cayman layer, and it's not going to scrape off very easily. However, the most of the time you do your work is also in the springtime for your sapping. So you got to be very careful with the equipment, especially the wheels of your tractor and also your wagon. If you scrape the tree, and it is very loose in the springtime, it'll open up and it'll have an infection court, and now we have coated, which also means then the amount of space for your sapping has reduced. Whether you're working in the fall to remove trees or in the springtime to do the sapping with your equipment, you got to be careful of the trail network that you're choosing. It's got to be solid ground. If it's soft, you're going to have rutting. It's going to damage the roots. The roots are within 2 feet, but the feeder roots are within the 1st foot of your soil surface. So if you do deep ruts, you're cutting off those feeder roots, which go all the way to the leaves, which then make, of course, your energy for your sap and all that. So be careful where you choose, where you're going to work. Don't rut.
So in summary, we're going to go through a few points for you to remember and to consider. Give small trees places to grow. So you saw the thinning that went on and creating some sunlight for those small trees. Look at your trees year-round. Monitor the health of the forest. Get out in the spring, get out in the summer, get out in the fall and take a look around. It's okay to remove big trees. A lot of maple producers want to keep every single maple tree. You saw that big one that really needed to come down. Follow conservative tapping guidelines. Monitor the sealing of the holes to determine the health of your trees. If cutting, remember the tender months, May to August, and make sure your equipment's not up against those trees. Don't graze your forest. You think it's going to be no damage, that's not true, it'll cause huge damage. Avoid heavy equipment, especially during wet periods, and avoid rutting. Keep the forest diverse, not 100% maples, and monitor disease and infestations. Become aware of what's out there, use the material that's there, check the Invasive Species Center website to determine what is happening in the maple world.